Oh, I remember Richard Nixon back in '74 and the final scene at the White House door, and the staff lined up just to say goodbye. Tiny tear in his shifty little eye, he said, "Nobody knows me, nobody understands."
Many people remember the 60s and the 70s to be an era of transformation that ultimately changed America into what it is today. This is the decade in which the civil rights movement had its most significant yet trying advances. It aimed toward minority groups including the LGBTQ community, women, African Americans, Native Americans, and others. In this decade, American citizens were hopeful for peace and the promise of restoration and equality in their society.
Having previously lost the presidential election to John F. Kennedy, Nixon was determined not to lose again. He took notice of the public's desires and used this knowledge as the base of his campaign. He made many reassuring promises to restore the faith in governmental leaders, which he was later unable to fulfill. Because of these unkept promises, the American public was discouraged by the government's seeming lack of ability to lead, and they grew frustrated with the way the government addressed abusive politicians.
1946 presidential elections. Jerry Voorhis was a Democrat who was well known and had already served 5 terms in Congress. During his campaign, Nixon made the public believe that Voorhis was a communist sympathizer. Voorhis denied these statements. Not wanting to repeat the Cold War, the people believed in Nixon's statements and voted for him. This caused Nixon to win a landslide victory in November 1968.
National Committee's headquarters were held at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. On the night of June 17th, the hotel security guard was doing his rounds when he noticed tape on a door that was commonly used by the maids. Assuming that the maids had forgotten about the tape, the guards removed it and continued on with his rounds. When rounding again, he noticed a new piece of tape on the same locked door. Knowing that the maids had already left for the night, he grew suspicious and called the police. When the police arrived at the hotel, they caught 5 men leaving the DNC's offices and arrested them immediately.
White House involvement was discovered and reported to Woodward and Bernstein. Woodward and Bernstein did not know the name of the person who gave them this information. They only knew that the informant was a high-ranking government official. So the informant was nicknamed Deep Throat because of his deep voice. This informant revealed that former CIA agent and current White House staff member Howard Hunt had played a major role in Watergate. Deep Throat's true identity was not discovered until 2005. Deep Throat was revealed to be Mark Felt. Felt was second in command of the FBI agency. Because of his position, he was given the task of investigating the White House involvement in the Watergate scandal. Felt's help in uncovering the details of the scandal allowed Watergate's trial to move along more quickly and exposed most of Nixon's crimes.
Just found the White House phone number on the burglar's belongings. Suspicions began to grow. Nixon swore that he had nothing to do with the break-in.
Good evening. Now that most of the major witnesses in the Watergate phase of the Senate committee hearings on campaign practices have been heard, the time has come for me to speak out about the charges made and to provide a perspective on the issue for the American people. For over 4 months, Watergate has dominated the news media. During the past 3 months, the 3 major networks have devoted an average of over 22 hours of television time each week to this subject. The Senate committee has heard over 2 million words of testimony. This investigation began as an effort to discover the facts about the break-in and bugging of the Democratic National Headquarters and other campaign abuses. But as the weeks have gone by, it has become clear that both the hearings themselves and some of the commentaries on them have become increasingly absorbed in an effort to implicate the president personally in the illegal activities that took place. Because the abuses occurred during my administration and in the campaign for my re-election, I accept full responsibility for them. I regret that these events took place, and I do not question the right of a Senate committee to investigate charges made against the president to the extent that this is relevant to legislative duties. However, it is my constitutional responsibility to defend the integrity of this great office against false charges. I also believe that it is important to address the overriding question of what we as a nation can learn from this experience and what we should now do. I intend to discuss both of these subjects tonight.
However, it was discovered that he was lying. One of these discoveries, several days after the break-in, it was discovered that the burglars had been promised thousands of dollars if they kept quiet by the Nixon re-election campaign. Later, during the Watergate trials, John Dean, a White House lawyer, testified that Nixon's close friend, the first Attorney General and advisor, John Mitchell, had ordered the Watergate break-in and participated in the cover-up. Then, it was discovered that Nixon and his campaign were planning to stop further FBI investigation using the CIA. Finally, several people who had aided the break-in alerted the reporters to Nixon's secret recording of official conversations. The discovery of Nixon's involvement shocked the nation, and reporters Woodward and Bernstein became famous for their role in this discovery.
After deeper investigation, CIA detectives discovered that before his presidency in 1968, Nixon endured many political defeats. These defeats had caused him to become paranoid, resentful, and defensive. Due to his paranoia, Nixon believed protesters and other radicals were trying to bring his administration down. He became so obsessed and consumed with his opponent's motives that he created an enemies list of people who considered a threat. Nixon wanted to gather information on the Democratic Party because he desired to expose and sabotage his opponent. The Committee for the Re-election of the Presidency, also known as CREEP, was willing to do whatever it took to win the coming election. They spied on the opposition rallies and spread false rumors and false reports. Around the same time, the Vietnam War was taking place. The war was unpopular among citizens, and hoping to use this dislike to ensure Nixon's re-election, CREEP composed a group of 5 former CIA agents and Cuban intelligence to infiltrate the Democratic Party headquarters at the Watergate Hotel. They were assigned to steal any sensitive material and put wiretaps on the phones. Immediately after the break-in, Nixon ordered a cover-up, issuing White House officials to destroy incriminating documents and gave false testimony to CIA investigators about his involvement in the break-in. Nixon and the members of his administration asked the CIA to stop from investigating the source of money paid to burglars because, according to the media, after the break-in in the Watergate, burglars were paid with the secret CREEP fund controlled by the White House. The Watergate burglars later went on criminal trial and were indicted by the grand jury on September 15 along with G. Gordon Liddy, who was a former FBI agent who aided Nixon's cover-up, and E. Howard Hunt, Jr., whose phone number linked to the scandal to the White House.
The court ordered Nixon to hand over all these tapes because they could be used as evidence against him. Nixon did not want to hand over these tapes and refused by stating that it was his right to keep these tapes private because of his role as president. Special Prosecutor Cox sued Nixon to get these tapes. Because of Cox's persistence, Nixon ordered Attorney General and the head of household of the Justice Departments to fire Cox. The Attorney General refused and resigned. The Deputy Attorney General also refused and resigned. Finally, Robert Brooke, the Solicitor General of the United States, fired Cox. Nixon's attempts to fire Cox became known as the Saturday Night Massacre. This was another damaging blow to Nixon's reputation. As the trials went on, Nixon realized that the tapes had to be handed over if he wanted the trials to end quickly. He promised to give the courts the tapes. When the tapes were finally handed over to the court, it was discovered that the tapes have been edited. The full-length tapes had been edited so that any conversation that would have incriminated Nixon were removed. The courts found out the rest of the tapes had been destroyed.
Towards the end of the trial, the House of Representatives voted for Nixon to be impeached. The House convicted him of 3 crimes against the Constitution and people of the United States. They stated that in his conduct of the office of President of the United States, Richard M. Nixon, in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States, and, to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, has prevented, obstructed, and impeded the administration of justice, has repeatedly engaged in conduct violating the constitutional rights of citizens, impairing the due and proper administration of justice and the conduct of lawful inquiries, or contravening the laws governing agencies of the executive branch and purposes of these agencies, and has failed without lawful cause or excuse to produce papers and things as directed by duly authorized subpoenas issued by the Committee on the Judiciary of House of Representatives and willfully disobeyed such subpoenas. In essence, the articles of impeachment convicted him with crimes including the obstruction of justice, abuse of his power, and criminal cover-up.
In all the decisions I have made in my public life, I have always tried to do what was best for the nation. Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. I would have preferred to carry through to the finish, whatever the personal agony it would have involved. But the interests of the nation must always come before any personal considerations. That because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Nixon did not want to be impeached, and so he resigned on August 8th. He left his office the next day. The Watergate scandal affected the trust Americans placed in the president and government. When Nixon was caught lying, it seemed that many more lies were revealed. This is one of the reasons why it's so hard for Americans to trust their government, and it's so easy for them to believe all the lies and theories about the government.
The Watergate scandal was used to get people's attention. I think that the 5 men who were on it were helping Nixon get more popular or even leave his mark on history.
While we depend on our members of Congress to do their jobs without fear of abusing power, support for the government by the people is critical. It is up to the Americans to hold the government to account. After Nixon's attempts to cover up the crimes and resignation, the Watergate scandal changed American politics forever and forced the people to question their leaders and think more critically about the next presidency.
The Watergate scandal had a devastating effect on American politics. This is because it exposed the darker side of politics, a side that some always knew existed but never addressed. Now American politics will never be looked at the same way. Individuals will always question the voice of those who they are electing.
We heard Richard Nixon say, "Welcome to the USA." The common sense I sometimes lack has opened up a seismic crack. We've fallen in and I can't pull